And we are live. So here we are once again in the stream. Me, the American Werewolf, and Joey Kives, fresh from Kives Out. Last night's commentary performance is joining us once again. So welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, dude.
Always glad to have you on, brother. Uh, you know, this is episode 61 of an American Werewolf in New Jersey. So trucking right along, and we are in our second of 9 shows that we're going to be putting on for the month of October and Halloween Hellfire. That's our particular brand of Halloween shows. Last night we were on a completely different track with things, taking on Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. But tonight, we're going about as far from that as we possibly can with a 4-decade-old classic that may be one of the best horror movies of all time and probably one of the most underrated horror movies of all time.
I agree.
I'm talking about 1980s The Changeling with George C. Scott. So if you're ready to go, we can get it going.
Whenever you're going, let's get going.
Boogie woogie.
In other words, yes.
So I think among the first Something Shitty This Way Come episodes that I did, or maybe at least the first 3, one of the movies I tackled was the Amityville Horror, which was just an absolute shit show. But it was popular, in my opinion, because of the blockbuster book that was released in the late 70s. About what that family claimed was going on in the house connected to the DeFeo murders, so on and so forth. But when I did the show, it was among my first Something Shitties. And so at the end of that subthread in every episode, what I try to do is come up with a movie that came out within the same time frame that I feel is a far better example of whatever that particular genre is. And in that case, it's a haunted house movie. One of the movies that I mentioned that came out the same year that I thought just blew it right out of the water was Tobe Hooper's Salem's Lot, which, although, it's sort of known as a vampire movie, I never thought that there was a house more haunted than the Marston house from Salem's Lot. I mean, it's just a creepy ass house, and James Mason's living in there, and you got Barlow in the basement. But the second movie I brought up, and I said it was a year later, was this movie, The Changeling. And I remember you and I met in 1987. And we've known each other since then and been close. But I seem to remember even as early as 1987, you were telling me about this movie, you and your brother Paul. And now,
when I first saw this movie, it was at one of those like $1.99 movie theaters.
Okay, yeah.
Back in the 80s, it was like the 3rd rung, 4th rung. And I went with my brother Paul and my sister Mary Beth, and we just went to go see a movie. We're like, oh, good, it's a ghost story, type deal.
Right.
And when it was over, everybody who walked into that movie theater were like pale white, and it was a good old-fashioned ghost story.
Yeah.
And I loved it ever since.
It's probably one of those films that sort of gets drowned out by splashier blockbusters. It doesn't have any of the standard horror queens or scream queens or any of the traditional monsters. It was a one-off kind of movie, so I could see how it doesn't have the biggest draw. but it's just it's fantastic. Far better than the Amityville Horror. I have no idea at all why people think that that's actually a scary movie. This was a great movie, a creepy movie, a great story, solid performances. I mean, it's fantastic. 40 years later, and I just finished watching that this morning. I was up around 5 o'clock, and I started half of it, and then I kind of went to sleep last night, and then I got up this morning and finished the other half, and I'm like, this is just great. I mean, it's 40 years old, and I was just glued to the screen because I hadn't seen it in a while, and I wanted to remember what happened. I didn't remember what happened next, and I'm like, oh, man, this is just fantastic. And let me say real quick, right now, this movie is broadcasting on Shudder and on Tubi. Tubi is a free app, streaming channel app. You can access it from any browser page or anything like that. You just register with a free email, and it's got a fantastic amount of content on there. And this movie is on there. It's just it's one wonderful flick.
And there's a thing about it, Mike, because you were mentioning it in the 1980s, and this is not disparaging the movies I'm about to mention. But the Halloween franchise was kicking into gear. The Friday the 13th was kicking into gear.
Yeah.
And it's nothing against them. I like them too. But I realized, because I too watched it again like a few days ago.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing, because of how old I'm getting, this was geared to
older.
Older. This was geared to be a mature, not a mature as in, adults only. It was not for kids.
Yeah.
It was meant to, when you got to a certain age, because it really was geared that way.
Yeah.
I forgot myself how good the performances were.
Yeah.
I remember the mood that the movie gave me. But when I got in there, I'm watching George C. Scott. Sorry, jumped ahead in case you had the picture. He was, eating the screen. He was eating up scenery. He was great in this movie.
Yeah, he was. And I think, unfortunately, this was the same year that the original Friday the 13th came along. So it just got drowned out in the big titles and in Friday the 13th. I mean, even that original movie, I unfortunately tried to watch it recently. It really is. I don't know. I think sometimes that these movies hold up because people want to cling on to the feeling of a previous time.
I agree.
I get that. You want to revive that feeling from 40 years ago when you were younger, and you had that sense of wonder, and your brain wasn't fully developed, and that suspension of disbelief was much easier to achieve.
Yes.
But 40 years later, I mean, if you're going to put me in a room and say I can watch The Changeling or I can watch Friday the 13th, I'm watching The Changeling.
Same here.
It's just this is actually based. I don't know if you knew this. It's based on a true account. Let's see. The screenplay was inspired. I'm getting this off Wiki. It was inspired by mysterious events that allegedly took place at the Henry Treat Rogers Mansion in Chestnut Park, Denver, when playwright Russell Hunter was living there during the 60s. After experiencing a series of unexplained phenomena, Hunter said he found a century-old journal in a hidden room detailing the life of a disabled boy who was kept in isolation by his parents. During a seance, he claimed, the spirit of a deceased boy directed him to another house where he discovered human remains and a gold medallion bearing the dead boy's name. Henry Treat Rogers, a wealthy Denver attorney, was childless, but prior inhabitants of the house remain undocumented. The mansion was demolished during the 1980s and replaced with a high-rise apartment building. Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's about right.
So, yeah, that sounds about right. But, I mean, you have the screen, and this man, Rogers, was the co-writer for the screenplay. So he's coming from, what he claims to be, a true account of things. And it's fantastic. We're starting out with George C. Scott, who is not known at all for horror movies, but has starred in two now of my personal favorites, this and Exorcist 3. As this man, he's like a music teacher and a composer, and it starts out where he's there with his family and the car's broken down, and he's not a rich man. He's just so kind of an everyman kind of guy. You see he's driving a station wagon, 1980. He's not driving a Benz, or he doesn't have a and the car breaks down and they have to get out and push, and he's turning it into a joke, so they're all laughing and having fun, and he pulls it off to the side of the road to find a payphone, and within like a minute this horrible car crash occurs, and his wife and his daughter are instantly killed. And what grabbed me right away, and I couldn't find an overlay image for it, was the look on his face when he's in that phone booth.
Yes.
And it looks like God has just punched him in the liver, like as hard as he looked like someone had just ripped his soul out. It's not even like an anguished, like over dramatic kind of thing. It's just like he can't process what he just saw happen in front of him. And I was like, oh man, this is acting, man.
And this is one of the reasons why, or one of the points of the movie that it works. There wasn't over the top stuff where it was required. It was a believability brought into the storytelling that connected with the audience, or at least it did when it was with me. Yeah. When I was younger and even now older.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you get those overly dramatic, where
the guy's screaming at the sky. I'm thinking of Pet Sematary when that guy gets his little son run over and he falls to his knees and he's like, and you're like, oh man,
you saw George C. Scott with one eye and one eyebrow when he cocked it up and saw the truck coming, and you saw his brain put it together, and he couldn't get out that phone booth.
Yeah.
To save him.
Yeah.
And that it was without a word. And you're right, it's like 30 seconds maybe.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. That's and we talked about this when we covered Sleepy Hollow yesterday, where you talked about walking, doing nothing but making it look interesting. Which Walken did to a great degree in Sleepy Hollow, but this was another level. Yeah. This was another level. He just sat there in that phone booth with no expression, and yet somehow was able to convey that his wife and daughter had just been killed in front of him, and you're just like, holy shit!
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's breathtaking, man. Yeah. And then it follows up 4 months later. Where he's decided he has to move on. He's moving to another city. And there's that one scene where the maid drops the ball. And then all of a sudden it flashes to his daughter, kind of throwing the ball to him. And then it flashes back to modern times. And the look on his face where you can see what that's been his thought, and then, just kind of snapped back like a rubber band. And you're like, oh, man. So, I mean, like within the first 10 minutes, you're just hit with these two masterful scenes. Yep. And just master's level performance from a guy who's just a great actor. I mean, you're not a horror actor, but he's just bringing it.
And he's not saying a word.
No.
There's no, over the top or a dialogue. It's just.
There is no dialogue.
Yeah. It's what amazes me about it was because we used to talk about it in acting class a lot, and it's called face acting. There's people who can't stand face acting because they think it's fake. But if you get somebody at the level of George C. Scott who can show all that emotion with just his body and his look, it's better. Clint Eastwood is another one who can do it.
Yeah,
like Clint. As one critic said, Clint Eastwood can say more with an eyebrow raise than some guys can do in a monologue.
Yeah.
And it's that old style of acting.
Yeah.
Because it's not flashy, or it's not it's just down rooted into, taking the character and bringing them out. And it works, man.
One of the things that I noticed about this movie, and then it led me to a wider realization, although I'm not 100% sure that it's correct, is that no one is beautiful in this movie.
Right.
And, then I started to think, well, holy shit, wait a minute. George C. Scott was never an actor with the leading ladies.
Right.
You never saw him with Monroe, or you never saw him with, Olivia whoever, or Rita Hayworth, or, any of that. It was just about the performance.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, I mean, you could have a pretty actress, don't misunderstand, but it wasn't the star power that overpowered the performance. It wasn't the name overpowering the performance. It was always the performance first in every time that I've seen him.
Right.
And maybe that was, I mean, maybe he was just savvy to Hollywood and, you know, avoided those sorts of things.
He was never one of the things that I've always admired about George C. Scott was the fact that when he won the Academy Award for Patton, or was nominated first as for Best Actor, when they asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, I'm not probably going to pick it up. I'm not performing for awards." He goes, "I'm doing this, you know, it's a contract. I like acting. I give my best and everything." When he won the award, they were waiting for him to show up, and he never took it.
Yeah, he's an actor. He's an actor, not a star.
Yeah, he's an actor.
Yeah.
And I like that. I've been saying that since I was 20 years old. I was asked when I was at Stockton, "Do you want to be a star?" I said, "No, I'd rather be an actor." You know, because and he does it really, and it doesn't get a lot of credit for it.
No.
I love to see younger people watch him now. Go through like he was in The Hustler. He was in Patton. He was in this movie. There's 3 movies right off the bat you can watch.
Right.
And just watch him do a brilliant job.
Yeah. Well, watch him in Exorcist 3.
And sorry, Exorcist 3 too.
Watch him in his performance in A Christmas Carol. Is my favorite. His is my favorite. Right. I like that more than Patrick Stewart.
Yep.
I like his performance more than Patrick Stewart. And that's saying something. I love Patrick Stewart. You know, we all
exactly. And same here. I agree with you completely on that.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. That's with David Warner as Cratchit.
Yep.
That's just a fun one to watch.
If you get a chance the next year and it didn't get much play, they did Oliver Twist, and he played Fagin.
Oh, I'd have to see that. Okay.
Yeah, if you can find it, he plays Fagin as the head of the who runs the boys and everything else.
Yeah.
You get done with that, you're not going to think of Ron Moody in the musical ever again, because he was just cold, and cryptic, and
It's a Charles Dickens novel, man. Yeah, that's the way it's played, man. It's a nasty, brutish, and short. It's a Hobbesian world in a Dickens novel, man. So, I mean, here we are. 4 months later, he's moving on. He moves to this house, into this new house, but he's kind of on autopilot. You know, I mean, he's devastated. He's waking up in the middle of the night. He's, and in the morning, he's just sobbing his eyes out. You know, he's still grieving for his family. And they move him into this house that is just the size of a small it's like the size of a mall.
Yeah.
It's like a hotel. It's like they moved him into the Overlook Hotel or something like that.
Right.
With these huge spiral staircases that just seem to go up like 4 stories. I'm like, who the hell would, I saw it at first and I'm like, holy shit, this is too much. And, small little goings on happening here. The water, it starts out small like it always does in the haunted house movies. The water's running. I think there's some noises here and there.
Banging.
Yeah, the door blows open, every once in a while he's playing the piano or something, and he doesn't really really notice all these things that he doesn't notice. Sort of happen to him. And before long, what is it that gets him to the idea that it's definitely not a coincidence? Is it the banging?
Well, when he heard the banging in the house the second time.
Oh, no, I know what I remember what it was. Okay,
and it was the maintenance guy.
Yeah,
because he said it's at 6:00. It's all, and the guy's saying it's an old house.
Yeah, it's got a routine too. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about it was, there were all common answers.
Right. Yeah.
And he was
you can accept that.
And he's going, but there's more to that.
Well, finally, what happens is he finds there was something thrown from the inside of the house, even though he's alone when he's walking to his car, and like a piece of stained glass lands at his feet. And he goes back into the house to try to find the broken window pane. And he discovers like these rooms upstairs in the attic. And there's a music box that is playing the song that he's been composing all this time.
Yeah, and he never heard it before.
No, he had never heard it before, but somehow he's been composing this piece that has been on this obscure music box that's up in the attic of the house that, in a room that he's never even been in. And that's when he starts to...
Can we talk about that room for 1 second?
Sure, go right ahead.
Because you and I have talked about this, comparing like practical applications of scary or like CGI.
Sure.
When he walks in that room and it's all that cobbing and and the dust and in my head I'm going, how long did it take them to do that?
Yeah.
Because it was just creepy enough.
Yeah.
It wasn't to the point of being a joke.
No.
But it wasn't so little that you're going, oh, there would be more shit in there if it was 60 years or so since that room's been open.
Yeah.
But the chair, the wheelchair, the old-fashioned wheelchair covered in the webbing, the soldiers thing, the music box that played the music, there gave a sense of sadness besides spooky to that room. Like it was neglected, just like the boy was when he was in that room.
Yeah.
Type deal. I loved that scene where he walks in.
Okay.
Sorry.
I hadn't given it that much thought, but I think you're correct. Because what we start to uncover, and what I was struck by was his openness and willingness to accept that this was clearly something paranormal. He didn't really seem to struggle with it.
Right.
And I don't know if that was because, he was just so raw about losing his family. So his defenses were down, because he was a music teacher. So he was open to listening. I don't know of a better way to put it.
Right.
He was just more open to receiving, this sort of, sensory input that allows him to compose songs. And so, when this other thing starts to happen, then, he's open to that too. But like right away, he's like, no, something's going on here. And
there's something beyond what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And he was attuned to it. Also, at the time, and this is a side note, because you and I have talked about this, I grew up in a haunted house in Philadelphia.
Okay, yeah.
It was registered. And by 1980, a lot more people were more accepted of the fact that something could be haunted.
Of course. Yeah.
It's always been like folklorish and things like that. But when they started saying when you had to buy a house, you had to tell people if it was haunted.
Declare. Yeah, you have to declare.
You had to declare it. So that also added to the movie. And they didn't make a big deal about it. They just had the main character accept the fact that it might be something beyond this world.
Well, once he starts to dig into it, there are all these foreboding sort of warnings. The woman at the society house, that house isn't fit to live in.
Yeah, God.
It doesn't want people, but he deduces that it's not so much that, it's just the opposite. And he says whatever it is desperately trying to communicate. It's not trying to push anybody out. It's trying to communicate. And I thought that, you could have done that in such a way that it would have been like, well, how the hell did he figure that out?
Right.
But somehow when he does it, you don't question it.
Right.
On the strength of his performance is just such that, he does something that if you were like, well, where the fuck did you, where did that come from? That's not, but I don't know if it's just the strength of the screenplay or the strength of the performance, but when he does it, you go right along with it.
It's a bit of both. I really do think it's a bit of both, because they don't have him overreacting to it. He's reacting to it, and it's his curiosity. He goes, "There's something there. I've accepted it."
Yeah, it's intuitive with him.
Yeah, and that's the point. When he did that, the audience goes with you.
Yeah,
the audience says, "Let's go." What this is, Michael, and there's a friend of mine. He just got an award. That's why he's on my brain. He writes these like horror plays, and somebody told him and asked him why, and he said, when I was a kid, my favorite stories was ghost stories around the campfire. This is kind of like that. It's ghost stories when it comes to movies. get no respect, because 9 times out of 10, it's either like a Casper type deal, or it's overblown and over dramatic and over heavy. George C. Scott, the director, whose name I cannot remember, and the screenwriter made it normal. They had the main character accept it without overblowing it, and as the audience, we went with it like you were telling a ghost story.
Yeah. It's let's see. Peter Medak is
Okay.
the director. Peter Medak is the director who doesn't have a lot of horror credits to his name. I think he has a few things here and there. Hold on, I'll check it out here.
I hope he's proud of this movie.
Yeah, same here. Let's see. He's got a couple episodes of Homicide. He also did a couple of episodes of Carnival.
There you
HBO
go.
species. So I could clearly see the connection there. You know, that creep factor. You know, with the boss who was in the wagon, you know, behind that curtain that you never really saw, but he was just creepy as fuck. You know, it's this person behind there, but you don't want to look. You know, at the same time, you want to look, but you don't want to look. Yeah,
and that's a good word. It's creepy.
Yeah,
you know,
this is a creepy movie.
Chill.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you start to get into the story, and you know, there's the seance.
Right.
They start to do the seance. You know, and there's this boy named Joseph. You know, Joseph Carmichael. Talking about his father, my body, the metal. You know, all these different things happening. And you know, like, it's funny because like it's also sort of a detective story again, like Sleepy Hollow was a detective story, and so George C. Scott sort of becomes this amateur sleuth, just going through public records about who used to own the house, and you know, something, you know, about a well, and you know, so he quickly finds everything out, you know, like really simply, it's like right there in plain sight.
Exactly. And he's driven to find it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's because, and it's a good play from the director's point of view, he couldn't save his daughter, but he can save this boy.
Yeah.
Type deal. And that's what I think was driving him. Not even so much the wanting to know the story, like Johnny Depp and what's the one he did with Frank Langella? The Ninth Gate.
The Ninth Gate,
yeah. He was also driven because he's saying, I can help him. And he couldn't save his daughter. It goes back to that helplessness and possibly wanting to do it. And that's a decent drive. Because he's not doing it for money. No. Because he's possessed. Or because, you know, whatever. He's doing it because he's like, something happened here and I can help.
Yeah.
And I love that.
It might give his life some meaning.
Again,
you know, in the face of all that loss, you know, he has something to do, you know, that matters.
Exactly.
So he finds, you know, that this boy it's this sickly boy, you know, very young, was murdered by his own. It's a gruesome story. The story of the Changeling, when he actually figures out or deduces, or, you know, through circumstantial evidence, starts to have this dialogue with the other woman from the royal the society that rented him the house, who sort of becomes his friend. There's no romance in this. There's no love interest in this. It's just a straight up spooky story. You know, and I like that in that the sense that, you know, his relationship with that woman was platonic.
Right.
You know, it didn't hit the usual checks. You know, it didn't check the, you know, the usual boxes that go with a horror movie.
Exactly.
Which I thought was just fantastic.
Right.
But they start to put together that this boy was murdered by his father, drowned. I mean, this horrible sort of thing. You actually see it where he yanks the boy's feet up out of the tub, and he just like sort of, you know, so he can't help himself, and he just drowns him in this shallow bathtub. And so he could like, and then he replaces him with another boy from an orphanage. And it's like this long, skewered, evil scheme,
and
which
even
is
when,
just
and
about
even,
money.
yeah, about money. And that was the other thing that was also gave it a modern feel to it, at least modern in 1980. The Changeling, and it was about money, and the Changeling grew up and was in politics. You know, he was a senator from this, and there was in 1980 we had a distrust of politics still from Watergate and Vietnam. There was that sense of distrust.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I can never look at a red and white, croquet ball ever again.
Yeah.
After this movie.
Yeah, he throws the damn ball into the river.
Yes.
Comes back to the house and it rolls back down the damn steps at him.
Steps at him. Wet.
Holy shit.
Too. It was stopping wet.
Yeah.
Like, God damn, man.
Wow.
This movie was relentless when it came to stuff like that.
Yeah. So you find out that the Changeling boy, because the boy that was killed came from a powerful family, but he was sickly. And I guess the father had been bypassed in the will, and it had all gone to the son.
The father was bypassed in the will, and it all went to him.
Yeah.
And if the boy died, it went to a charity.
Right.
He was getting nothing.
Yeah, and then the son ends up becoming like this U.S. senator, and he's not really a likable character. You get he's some sort of career politician, and just cronied out to the max.
Yep.
He's not an admirable character. He's not a sympathetic character. He just sort of comes across as this elitist sort of asshole, who's been born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And you really don't mind, when George C. Scott finally confronts him with the truth, he actually tries to buy him off.
And I used to think, and especially when I resaw it, that I had some sympathy for the guy because he didn't do the killing. He might not have known.
I don't think he did know.
But that's what I mean. In that scene with George C. Scott, he goes, you people who come with me with this want the same thing. And George C. Scott went, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh my God. Other people have confronted him with this, and he just paid him off to have him go away. I mean, there was like that small little line in there. I'm going, because George C. Scott didn't want it. He gave him all the information.
Right. Yeah. And
said,
first he tries to buy him. Yeah, he opens a checkbook, and George C. Scott is like, oh my God, like you're trying to,
Yeah.
Like, I'm telling you, what your father has done, and you're trying to write me a check. You're like not even like attempting to approach this as a human being.
Exactly.
And he's just, he's not a good guy.
No, he's not. He's not.
No. He attempts to have some police officer, sort of try to scare George C. Scott, but that guy isn't long for it.
And if you remember, he was on Battlestar Galactica as Boltar.
Oh, was he really? Oh, no, I don't remember. I don't remember that far back.
The original Battlestar Galactica.
Really? Oh, God.
When I saw him in the movie theater, because like it was that show was on, 5 people yelled out, "It's Boltar!" Yeah.
This guy is Boltar. Oh, he was Gaius Boltar. Oh, was he really? That asshole was Gaius Boltar
in the original Battlestar Galactica.
I don't think anybody's as ever good as the guy who played it in the reboot. Gaius Boltar is like one of my favorite television characters of all time. No more Mr. Nice Gaius. That's what he said. No more Mr. Nice Gaius.
That's it. But he was
Jesus.
But there were a lot of people that were doing like great work in this movie. I mean, even if they were coming on with 1 or 2 lines type deal. Like you were talking about the seance.
Yeah.
The scene right before that, George C. Scott's talking to somebody from the psych lab in the college where he's teaching. And they said, well, off the record, we have mediums that come in once a week.
Right.
We'll send them to you. That's because but it was the way it was set up. Even these small little parts they weren't throwaway. They weren't just doing it.
No,
These
and there
people
was
were digging telling this story.
yeah, and no one was phoning it in.
Yeah.
You could feel the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That everybody, because I mean, if you read the script, I imagine if you read the script, especially in 1980, it's quite a complex tale.
That's right.
And you probably like, wow, this is a really great story. I'd love to be a part of this.
Part of it.
How can I, just let me be down, for a couple of lines, just let me get in,
Let me get in this.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
There was a scene with the where they found the well, but it was the mother who was living in there.
Yeah.
And has a small monologue talking about how it affects her daughter.
Yeah.
That monologue is brilliantly done.
Yeah.
The way she does it, because it's not like borderlining going crazy or borderline, that image.
That's a freaky fucking image. If you saw that in your dream where somebody's trying to come up through the floor, but in reality, it's him trying not to drown to death.
Yeah.
And it's just an awful, awful thing. I mean, you're like, oh God, this is a gruesome. It's an understated sort of gruesome because it's not gory,
right? And it's not bloody.
No, it's not. I don't think there is any blood in this movie,
except when George C. Scott pulled a piece of glass out of his neck. That was
from that broken window pane or something like that. But I mean, this isn't some splatterfest. Right. Everything is based on the strength of the story and the strength of performances. And I would be willing to bet probably a lot of modern horror fans don't even know about this movie.
I would give you that. I think it got overlooked, and it's a shame because, like I said, it's a ghost story. Yeah. And people think of ghost stories and go, okay. Yeah. But no, it's a good one. It's one I was watching this in my kitchen on my laptop, and I had like the light over the sink and a little small light on. And by the middle of the movie, I got up and turned on the overhead light and everything else because it started to creep me out a little bit.
Yeah.
And not in a bad sense. I wasn't like, but it was like, this is just a good storytelling scarefest.
Yeah, you're rolling the dice with ghost stories. And unfortunately, something like Amityville has become like a super franchise. I think that there's been like I think Eric said one time there's been 10 sequels to that.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand because the first one was a piece of shit.
Dude, there was a TV show, I think, to that lasted like 2 seasons.
It's just awful.
Awful
stuff.
Well, no, you were saying about why Amityville has the explosions and the bloods and the flies and all this stuff, and it's all either, superficial animatronics.
Yeah, I mean, but go ahead.
Sorry. This show relied on George C. Scott's expression.
Yeah.
His friend, the female, when she came around the corner and stopped and looked up the stairs.
Yeah.
And he came out and you saw the wheelchair at the top of the stairs.
Yeah, right there.
And then the music comes thundering in.
Yeah.
This is old school telling a ghost story.
Yeah.
And I keep repeating that because it didn't need. Well, like the ending, the big ending when everything starts catching on fire and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It didn't, as good as that was, you didn't need it.
Well, you know what? This movie would have been fantastic in black and white.
I agree.
If somebody ever remasters this in Chrome,
you're
going to have a hell of a movie. I mean, you could watch this like an old school Vincent Price kind of haunted house movie. It's amazing.
This reminds me a bit of like Edgar Allan Poe.
Sure.
In a sense that because Poe, I can't remember his detective that he created. It was a French detective that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle read and said that's helped him create Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
But it was also always with that macabre feel, that ghost story feel and everything else. This reminded me of that because it was just, somebody could, like I said, stand in a fire and orate the story, just do an oration of it and still scare the shit out of people.
Yeah, you could see it. You could see it. People sitting around a campfire telling a story like this. Yeah.
Yep.
This is good stuff, man.
I saw it. I think I was 15 or 16.
Okay.
I'm 56 now. and I'm still talking about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it was 6 months ago. I was talking about Amityville, and I'm like, what a piece of shit. You know, I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like I don't care about any of these people.
Yep.
You know, James Brolin's like not washing his hair, and he's staring, and like, I'm like, what are you doing, man? You know, like that's not acting. You know, Rod Steiger, and I'm like, what the hell? You know, he's just sitting there while all these flies are covering his face. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You know, like this doesn't make any sense. I'm like, this is stupid.
Exactly.
And I had a sneaking suspicion that I wasn't going to like it because it was on the Something Shitty subthread, but because I hadn't seen it in like 25 years. But, you know, I'm always willing, if I watch those movies on a Something Shitty subthread, to come back out and say, hey, I was wrong about this. I was ready to tank it on Something Shitty, but, you know, here's why I liked it. But it was awful.
No, I agree.
Awful.
It was done poorly.
Yeah.
Like there's like The Legend of Hill House. There's another ghost story but called Hell House.
We're covering that this month. Yeah.
But that's the thing about it was these are good. Oh gosh, it was they made a movie out of it. Daniel Radcliffe.
Oh, The Woman in Black.
The Woman in Black.
I love that movie. I own that movie on Blu-ray. That's a fantastic, scary movie.
It's a fantastic, and if you ever read the book, it's terrifying. It really is. It's a terrifying book story.
I try to tell people about that movie. I know you're maybe one of 5 people that I know that have seen that movie. That's a really, really good movie.
I worked on a production. There's a Chicago playwright who adapted it to a 2-man story. And it was a guy in the theater talking to the guy who experienced the story. And they tell it to the audience through like theatrics. And it's by the end, people were screaming. They gasped. Because the way they threw in a different type of ending. And well, not so much that it was in the modern time. You found out the guy who was in the theater saw The Woman in Black and he goes, oh, when you hired that actress. And he goes, there was no actress. Lights out. And you know, they all gasped and things like that. But as somebody said, it's that's British style ghost storytelling too. It's got a world where we can connect and communicate with people. The orated stories are getting passed over.
Yeah,
you know, and because like the creepy guy in the asylum, the person who walks by the graveyard and something moves. You know, those type stories are getting and it's not like they're getting ignored all the time for bad stories.
Right.
But they sometimes get ignored because they're not flashy. And that's a shame, man.
Hold on a second. I'm just going to do something here. All right. Little light action. Changing the lighting around.
There we go.
All right. I think I finally figured out what I need to do here. All right, that's better. That's better. Okay. So, I mean, it's good shit. It's good shit.
It's if anybody's out there who hasn't seen it, what did you say beside Shudder?
Tubi.
Tubi.
It's on Tubi. Tubi is
if
free.
You haven't
Shudder
had
is
a
not.
chance to see it, treat yourself for Halloween and watch this movie.
Yeah,
seriously.
This is perfect. It's got a gothic feel to it.
Yeah.
Because the connection to the actual story takes place, almost 100 years ago. It's
very underrated soundtrack. I love the music in this.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really, really sorry.
It's not in your face. It's not in your face. It's just, there are almost no practical effects in this. It's just straight up storytelling, very little gore. There's no gore.
And the weird thing about it is that this just popped in my head. Technically, if you are with somebody with young kids that are like 10, 12 years old, you can watch this with them.
Yeah.
It's not like, granted, the scene where they actually, commit the crime on Joseph, you might want to have them, turn their head away.
Right.
Because it's a kid being drowned.
Yeah.
But all the other scenes,
I think we were talking about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all the other scenes. You could bring the, sit and share that experience, like, another ghost story.
Yeah, I was going to say, we were talking about during Sleepy Hollow yesterday, where killing a child is, considered a line that, doesn't get crossed too often in a horror story. It happened yesterday in Sleepy Hollow, but they did it in such a way it was without fuss, without a great deal of focus. It just happened very quickly, and then that was it. Here, it's done and it's crossed the line, and it's, looked at in much more depth. Without.
Actually, there's twice. The boy in the tub and the girl getting hit with the car.
Oh, yeah.
There's two deaths with children in it. And that's actually surprising. I didn't realize that until you just pointed that out.
Yeah.
About Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah, Watkins reaches under the boards and grabs that kid, and then you don't see it happen, and then next thing you know, Watkins, leaving the or the horseman's leaving.
Yeah. But that's
hell of a flick. All right, so our strong recommendation is to see this damn movie. It's for free right now on Tubi. If you're looking for a quality, spooky Halloween styled movie, this is where the money's at.
Absolutely.
I think that this is probably a good place to maybe bring it to a close.
Works for me.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so I want, if you get a chance and you see the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm gonna have to start doing that earlier on because I don't know that people are waiting 40 minutes for the message. I'm gonna have to start getting that out early. But if you subscribe to the channel if you think it's worthy. My thanks to Joey Kives.
Joey Kives
from the neighborhood, from the block, Joey Kives.
I stepped out with my knives out. If you know what I mean.
Forget about it. Forget about it.
It's nothing. No big deal.
Nothing. Yeah, Joey
no
Kives.
Big deal. You got a lovely house here, composer. Damn shame it's going to burn to the ground at the end of the movie.
Forget about it.
No problem.
This is it for the week. That's it for us. Next week, we will be back, and I will be pulling double duty. I'm going to be doing 2 broadcasts in one night. Wednesday, I'm on with Ryan for the Spanish horror flick that I mentioned in our top 10 list called Wreck, which I just think is a fantastic, scary fuck movie. And then that's at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. At 10 p.m., I go back and I'm meeting Rod down on the left coast. And we're going to do Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, that Guillermo del Toro supported movie. And it's just so damn good. If you're still conscious and you want to join us, feel free. And then on Thursday, Bill and I and my friend Doug are doing The Witch. So there's going to be there's going to be a serious amount of horror going down next week.
Those three are like out of the parks.
Yeah, we chose well for these Halloween movies, so it's going to be a good time. My thanks to you once again, Joey Kives from the neighborhood. And
thanks to you, sir, for having me on.
Always, brother. And I think that's it for tonight. But until then, don't waste your time with bullshit. Take care and good night.
Good night.